Well, I mean, I'll start at the beginning. I'm a native New Yorker. All right, I was born in Brooklyn, New York, to a very Italian family. Okay, very Italian family in a very Italian neighborhood of Brooklyn, New York, and grew up with the expectation that I was going to get a real job. You know, a real job meaning manual labor. Um, but as it turns out, my father got into trouble with, shall we say, an Italian social club. Um, if you can use your imagination and think about movies that you've seen. Mm-hmm. And so we had to leave New York. I mean, we had to like get out of New York. And we moved to Hialeah, Florida. And we moved to Hialeah, Florida because that's where my grandparents, my mother's parents, had a house. And it was their winter home. And we moved there thinking it was only going to be temporary. But my father so upset these people in New York that there was no going back. And so suddenly, I mean, I tell people I went to sleep in New York and I woke up in Florida wondering why it was so hot and humid, you know, and realizing that we had now relocated there in a very small house. There was my father, my mother, my brother, my sister, and my grandparents. There was a lot of tension, right? There was just a lot of conflict and all that. And I sought any way that I could get out of the house. And in school, and I mean high school and high school, I discovered theater. And theater was my escape. And it was my escape in many, many ways. It was my escape in that when you are an actor, you become somebody else. Mm-hmm. All right, you take on the profile and the persona of somebody else. And since I was an unhappy child, I liked becoming somebody else. The other thing is you had rehearsals, and those were at night. So you got out of the house. Like when I was 16 years old, I bought a car. It was a classic hippie Volkswagen, you know, Volkswagen Beetle. And I spent as much time as possible in the theater. And that's what I thought that I wanted to do my entire life. In high school, I won the award in the state of Florida as the best actor in high school. And so I was feeling, you know, very proud, very proud. And this man that I didn't know who he was, he saw me at the ceremony and he said, "Don, sit down. I have notes for you." And I was like holding my trophy, you know, as the best actor. And I'm like, notes for me. And I sat down and I listened to him for about an hour. And all the notes he had were terrific. I mean, they were spot on. And finally I said, who are you? And he said he was the head of the theater department at the University of Tampa, which I didn't even know existed. And I said, well, most of us, we're all going to Florida State University in Tallahassee. And he goes, if you go to Florida State, they're going to make you a spear carrier. You're never going to really get a major role. He said, if you come to Tampa, I will teach you how to be an actor. So I went there and I had 4 fabulous years. I mean, I learned to be an actor, but I also learned that to be a true theater person, you needed to know psychology, you needed to know philosophy, and you needed to know all the skill sets of an actor. And I learned to love learning when I was in college at the University of Tampa. Mm-hmm. So much so that I graduated as the outstanding male student. And between acting and psychology, I thought, well, you know, I'm probably always going to be cast as the short, chubby Italian. And do I want to do that? Or do I want to help people by being in psychology? So I decided for psychology, but I wanted humanistic psychology. I wanted psychology that was focused on people and helping people. And there was a program at Duquesne University in Pittsburgh that was in existential phenomenological psychology, which was my primary philosophy study. So I applied and I got in, and that's what had me move to Pittsburgh. So I did the master's at Duquesne, but the entire time, any chance I had, I would go see theater. All right. I would take we have what's called an incline. I'd hop a trolley car. I'd go see theater. And one day, in Pittsburgh, we have like a mountain in the city called Mount Washington with a big view of the city. And I was trying to date this ballerina, and I was talking with her, like unloading my soul. And I'm saying, here, I've got my master's in clinical psychology and all that, but I really feel this yearning to go to theater, go back to theater. And she says to me, well, why didn't you go to Carnegie Mellon? And I said to her, what is Carnegie Mellon? And she says, it's the oldest school of drama, one of the most famous, if not the most famous school of drama in the country. And I said, well, where is it? And she literally just pointed to this tall building that I could see on the horizon. And she's like, it's right over there. So I, like you, since I don't believe in coincidences, I was like, okay, I came to Pittsburgh ostensibly for psychology. I wanted to go to theater, and I discovered that the oldest, most famous school of drama is here. So I go over there, and I say to them, I'm interested in a PhD program. And they say to me, oh, we just got rid of our PhD program. And I was like heartbroken. It's like, you got rid of it? And they go, yeah, but some of our professors have gone over to the University of Pittsburgh, which is next door to Carnegie Mellon. So I went there, I knocked on the door, and I met this man whose name was Attilio Favorini, who was an Italian from Brooklyn. Okay? We hit it off. I got a scholarship and joined the PhD program there. I had 5 wonderful years. Wow. I worked with my mentor. His name was Leon Katz. We did something called the floating theater, and we would bring in, this is like 1977 to 81, we would bring in the craziest theater from New York, from anywhere, like the most bizarre, far-reaching, challenging theater. And it was an incredible education. But then, in 1981, I was finished with classes, and it was like, well, what am I going to do now? And a student of mine, a former student of mine, was at Carnegie Mellon and said, they're looking for an assistant to the head of the drama program. Now, the drama program, again, is the oldest school of drama in the country at Carnegie Mellon. And I thought, well, let me apply to that. I'll apply to that. And I asked my mentor, Leon Katz, to write me a letter. And Leon was a Jewish man from Brooklyn. And he wrote a letter to the head of the drama program at Carnegie Mellon, who was, you guessed it, a Jewish man from Brooklyn. So, so I show up at the meeting, at the interview, and he walks out and he looks at me and he goes, who are you? And I said, I'm Marinelli. I'm Leon's friend. And he goes, oh, come on in. So I sit down and he says, tell me your story. And I go, well, I was born in Midwood, which is a very Jewish neighborhood in Brooklyn. And then we moved to Bensonhurst, which is a very Italian neighborhood. And he looks at me and he goes, oh my. He goes, I was born in Bensonhurst, and then we moved to Midwood. And I knew right then and there it was going to happen. So I became the assistant to the head of drama. But I was very good. All right, I was really good at what I did. So within a year, I became the assistant head. And then within 4 years, he left, and the new head of drama was a British woman, British, Royal Academy. She loved me. Then I became the associate head, and I had a great life. Okay, I mean, for 16 years, I was either the assistant or the associate head. of Carnegie Mellon drama. I would go to Hollywood for parties. I would go to New York for Broadway show openings. I mean, it was fabulous. But in the mid-1990s, we would travel the country auditioning young people, okay, who wanted to come to Carnegie Mellon. But I was sensing something very strange. And at one point, there were maybe 100 students waiting for auditions. And I thought, you know what? This is my chance to do a little bit of a little test. And I said to them, I want you to imagine that it's Friday night and money is no object. But how many of you on your own volition will go see live theater? And maybe 25% of the hands went up. And I'm thinking, you're applying for like the most famous drama program and you don't really like live theater. I said, how many of you will go to the movies? 50% of the hands went up. Then I said, how many of you would prefer to order a couple of Domino's Supreme pizzas, get a case of beer, and sit at home playing video games? And every hand went up. Oh. So I knew. I came back to Pittsburgh. I called the faculty together and I said, look, everybody, we have either a tremendous opportunity or a tremendous threat. And they're like, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? And I said, well, the classy way of putting it is interactive digital media. And they looked through that and they went, you mean video games? And I said, yes, I mean video games. And they had a conniption. They were like, you got to be kidding. You mean like Mario? You mean like Donkey Kong? You mean like Sonic the Hedgehog? And I said to them, look, everybody, right now, this is the early stage of gaming. I mean, it's what we call 2D scrolling games, 8-bit, 16-bit. I said, but there's no doubt this is going to evolve into a major industry. And not only can we be the first ones there, but Carnegie Mellon School of Computer Science is considered the best in the country. We always fight with we fight with the Massachusetts Institute of Technology and Stanford University as to who's the best in computer science. But it was like, you got the oldest school of drama, you got the best school of computer science, we should be working together. But the faculty wanted nothing to do with it. So, you know what I did? I resigned. I resigned as the associate head of drama. I walked over to the School of Computer Science. I knocked on the door and I said, is there any room in your sandbox for a drama professor? And I expected them to laugh at me, throw me out of the room. But instead they said, Don, we would be honored to have you join us. You would bring a whole different mindset of storytelling, character development, immersive media. And if you were to join us, we might start having good parties. So I then said, this is great. Can I have a big raise too? And they went, no problem. So I went over there, and for 2 years I learned about computer science. I worked on some projects, the whole time wondering, what am I doing here? I'm not a geek and what have you. But within 2 years, they introduced me to Randy Pausch. Okay? Randy had just come back to CMU, to Carnegie Mellon. He had been down in Virginia, I believe, or North Carolina. And he came back and he started to do something called building virtual worlds. And, I met him. I went to his studio, and the first thing that struck me about his studio is that it was filled with stuffed animals. All right? He had stuffed animals all over the place. And you have to realize that most of computer science is boring. Like, these are boring people. But Randy was erudite. He was fun. His students loved him, and it was like, wow, this is a different. This is not your normal computer scientist. And then the dean of computer science had been on a committee at the University of Southern California in Los Angeles. Now, this again is in the 90s, right? And he was there, and he said to them, to the School of Film, that the film industry is going to become digital, right? It's going to become digital and computerized. And what they should do at the University of Southern California is create an entertainment technology center to focus on the computerization of the filmmaking process. The dean's name was Raj Reddy from India. Raj Reddy, R-E-D-D-Y. First name is Raj, R-A-J.
AJ.
Then he came back. Then he came back to Pittsburgh, and he was like, "Well, wait a minute. We've got the School of Drama. We've got computer science. We've got this crazy drama guy who's already into computer science. We've got Randy. Let's bring them together to form the Entertainment Technology Center." And so I tell people it was what we call in America a shotgun wedding. It was like, you two are going to work together. Now, I'm sort of an alpha male. I'm used to running things. Randy's an alpha male. He's used to running things. And people were like, I don't know if this is going to work. I mean, one of them might kill the other, And so Randy and I sat down, and we both had to admit, it was like, we're going to have to work together, which means we're going to have to be honest with each other, because we shared an office. We shared an office. We shared a desk for the first few years. And I finally said to him, Randy, I've got to be honest with you. I really don't know what you people do in computer science. I said, I know that it involves zeros and ones, and that's about it. And then Randy looks at me and he goes, Don, I got to be honest with you. I don't really know what you theater people do, except it seems to involve a lot of hugging and kissing. He said, if you promise not to hug and kiss me, we should get along. And I was like, you have nothing to worry about. And so we spent 6 years educating each other. And I'll give you an example of that. We shared an office. The Entertainment Technology Center, half of our students were from computer science. The other half were from the arts, from music, drama, design, art, you name it, okay? And so a computer science student would walk in to see Randy and explain some things to him, and Randy would say something like, you're going to be caught in an infinite loop. And then the kid would leave, and I would say to him, okay, what's an infinite loop? I said, I was on one in 1969 in Miami through marijuana. I mean, what's an infinite loop in computer science? He would explain it to me. Then a creative would come in and see me and tell me a story and all that. And I would say, the problem here is you're playing the subtext, okay? The kid would leave and Randy would go, okay, you criticized him by saying he's playing the subtext. What does that mean? And I would go, when you're playing the subtext, that's what this means. So that went on for 6 years.
Wow.
And it was a great time. We were all about working for industry. So we worked for both for-profit companies like Disney Imagineering, like DreamWorks, like Electronic Arts, gaming companies galore and all that. And then we also worked for like children's museums or science centers or hospitals. And it was great until Randy's father was diagnosed with cancer, right? And Randy had, and a lot of this isn't even in the book, all right? It's not in his book. Randy had a fantastic relationship with his father. I did not. I was like jealous of it, right? So he had this fantastic relationship, and he said to me one day, I can't do this anymore, this being he and I running the ETC, because my father is dying and I want to be there for him. So he resigned and I took over. A year later, his father had died and Randy was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. And thus began the whole last lecture and all that. And And then I ran the ETC from 2005, 2006 to 2012, and I made it global. And when I say global, what we had was so exciting that we had a visitor who was the governor of the state of South Australia. And he came and he said, we want this. So we set up ETC Australia in Adelaide. Then one day I got a call in my office from the front desk and they said, there's a delegation from Japan here. They want to see you. And I was like, okay, send them up. And it was a delegation from the city of Osaka. And they laid out this blueprint for ETC Osaka, Japan. And they're like, here's the building we'll give you. And I was like, okay, let's do that. And then I had a business partner in computer science who was from Korea. All right. And Korea became like my second home because we had what are called dual degree programs with Korea, with like 10 universities. And I was constantly going to Korea to give talks and all that. And Korea was paying to send their students to the ETC. Then I had a meeting with Electronic Arts in Silicon Valley. And it's a very funny story because we would send our students to California all the time to see these companies. And we were there with my students. Randy had already resigned, and like the head of Electronic Arts said to me, Don, I've got to tell you something that's really going to upset you. And I said, oh, great. Just what I want, to be upset. And I said, what is it? And he goes, well, we're about to give the University of Southern California $8 million and tell them to build a program just like yours. And I said, you know what? That is upsetting me. I mean, because we've got it. It's here. You're telling them to basically copy me, copy the program. And they said, well, the thing is, we want to sit down with George Lucas. We want to sit down with Steven Spielberg. They're on the board. We're basically buying a seat. Okay? And I said, so what are you going to give me? And they said, nothing. And I said, oh, no. I'm an Italian from Brooklyn. I got to get something. And they go, well, what do you want? So I looked around and I said, how about a wing of your headquarters so I can create ETC Silicon Valley? And they were like, okay. So we had ETC Silicon Valley, which went on until like 2016, 15 or something like that. So my goal was, I would say to my students, you have 4 semesters. All right, it's a graduate program. I said, why not spend it on 4 continents? Okay, come to Pittsburgh for the first semester, and then I will create projects all over the world. Very quickly, Europe came on board. So there was ETC Portugal. Then there was ETC Barcelona, Spain. And the last one was ETC Manchester, England. And my job was to find the projects all over the world and then say to the students, okay, where do you want to go? What do you want to work on? Do you want to work on a game project in Silicon Valley? Since Japanese culture was very, very popular for gamers, do you want to go to Japan? Do you want to do something completely different, like go to Australia, like go to the other end of the world? Or do you want to go to port? And that was my job, and I loved it. The problem was I visited these places twice a semester. So all I did was travel around the world, going to these schools, these campuses, to make sure things were running well. And by 2012, I was tired. And I was turning 60, all right? And I was like, and I'd already been like a lousy father to my daughter. I was never home. My wife had to do everything. And I knew it was time to leave. So I retired. Since retiring, I've never been busier. Okay? So now I teach for 13 years at Arizona State in arts, media, and engineering. and I'm currently teaching an online class there in esports, digital marketing, and consumer engagement. And I just finished grading their quizzes. Okay, I teach at Florida Southern College in Lakeland, Florida, which is an MBA level course in sports management. I teach at Northeastern University in Boston, a course on the metaverse, what's called Managing the Metaverse. Then I taught for 8 years at Columbia University in the city of New York in the MBA program. And then this year, here in Pittsburgh, a local college, Point Park University, said, Don, we want to completely redo everything. We need somebody with a vision who gets things done. We want you. So I agreed, and I created the Center for Experiential Narrative Technology. Meanwhile, my Korean business partner, who does a lot of work in Vietnam, and with whom I had gone to Van Lang University in 2010, said, are you interested in coming back to Vietnam? And I said, I would love to go back to Vietnam. So I went back. He flew in from Korea. We had a wonderful meeting there. And I was stunned at how big Van Lang University had become. Yeah. I mean, 50,000 students, all these degree programs, a wonderful campus, growing and all that. And I went there and I was like, wow, this is fantastic. And they said, okay, how do we get you to be part of this? And I said, for an American to help Vietnam, it's very important for me, okay? Because as you can imagine, I get off the plane and people are like, so are you here to visit places you were in during the war? And I'm like, no, okay, all right. I did get a draft notice in 1970. I was 1A. I was like applying for colleges going, I'm going to be in the Army before you know it. But my draft number was high, and they stopped the draft right below me. So I'm like, nope. Now, fast forward, I did enlist in the Air Force in 1980 because my wife was Army. Well, she's an Army veteran, and my father was Coast Guard in South Pacific during World War II, and my brother was in the Navy, and I was like, I wanted to serve. So I was an education specialist in the Air Force Reserve for 6 years. But so with Van Lang, I'll be teaching a game design fundamentals course starting next month. And I'll be doing that with 4 faculty members at Van Lang. And then meanwhile, they want me to maybe teach an intro to esports management course. And I'm like, I'll teach everything, It's all online. I mean, everything that I do is from this seat, okay? Wow. Except for Point Park University, which is a 15-minute drive downtown Pittsburgh, right? So I have to admit, I've got a great life. I mean, I've got no complaints. I remember years ago, decades ago, when it looked like I was going to become a teacher, and part of me was actually sad because I thought I could be a great actor and all that. And one of my mentors at the University of Pittsburgh said, Don, never forget teaching is a noble profession. And at first I was like, yeah, right, okay, it's a noble profession. But you know what I've learned 50 years later? It's a noble profession. Yeah. Okay? It's a noble profession. And the fact that I can have an impact on a young person's life and provide some guidance, provide some wisdom, because one of the things Randy said about the ETC, which was brilliant, he called it the Dream Fulfillment Factory. Right? The Dream Fulfillment Factory. And what did that mean? That meant students were coming in and they had a dream. And our job was, how can we help them fulfill that dream? And sometimes it wasn't fulfilling it the way they thought. For example, you'd get animators in and they all said, every single one, I want to work at Pixar. All right. I want to work at Pixar. And Randy and I would like look at each other and go, this student is a good artist. He or she is not a great artist. They're not going to work at Pixar. But where else could they work? What game studio could they work at? What other themed environment could they work at? And our job was to help guide them to a place where there would be meaning, where they could, in fact, fulfill their dream. So that's still my mission today.
Beautiful. See, what you've been doing is to help people to achieve their dreams, right? And if they're achieving their dreams, they're going to have a fulfilling life. And a fulfilling life, we have a happy life, happy conversation, build happy family. That dream carries on to the next generation,
Next generation.
Yeah, that's very beautiful, right? So allow me to bring you back in time, okay?
Okay.
Yes, so I want you to so since when you moved from New York to Florida? At what age?
10.
10, all right. So you mentioned that you started to having because I'm writing so many notes in here, okay? Yeah. So you mentioned that you started to have a love for theater art by high school, because that's when you're upset, and by acting, then you can be in different roles, and by rehearsing, and then you can get out of the house and stuff. I want to bring you before you move to Florida. Okay, so when you were little, how the house looked like? How's the environment look like when you were in New York?
It was rough.
Rough.
All right. I mean, Italian families, they do a lot of yelling. They do a lot of screaming. They do a lot of hitting. But I'll tell you, I mean, now that you brought me back, I think it was in 3rd grade, all right, in Brooklyn. And we had an assignment where we had to write a story. Okay, we had to write a story. And 3rd grade, I don't know, how old was I? I mean, so I wrote a story based upon my family activities. So it was a gangster story. It was like the mafia, okay? So I wrote it, and when we went to school, they asked us to read it aloud. I stand up in front of the class and read it. And so I read it. I didn't read it, I acted it. And it would be things like, because I still had my New York accent, it'd be things like, and so the car turned the corner, and the machine gun came out of the window, and the bullets were flying all over the place. And so I'd read my story, and the teacher says, Donald, would you be willing to read that to the other classes? And I was like, yeah, sure. So I would go to another class, and I would read it, and then something amazing happened. Everybody clapped.
Oh.
Right? Everybody clapped. And I was like, wow, they're applauding. I mean, the only clapping I had was slapping me for saying something, or slapping me on the butt. And I was like, gee, I guess I'm good at this. I guess I can bring a story to life. So that was the earliest indication that I had a gift for acting and for conveying, the meaning of a story.
So prior to that, in your wildest dream about the future you're gonna become, what was your thought that one day you're gonna be this type of job or do this kind of things? What was that?
Well, it was very simple. I was supposed to become a baseball player.
Baseball player, and why?
Because my father's dream in life was to be a baseball player. And when he was young, he was a very good baseball player. But then the war happened. Okay? The war happened. And then all the young men were being drafted, or they were enlisting. So my father put that dream on hold, and he enlisted in the United States Coast Guard. But the Coast Guard they had what were called Army freight supply ships, these small ships that sailed from New Orleans to Australia to New Guinea to all the islands in the South Pacific, supplying the ammunition, the money, and all that to the troops. So when he got back after the war, he went back to baseball, and he was invited. In fact, he got letters of invitation from the Brooklyn Dodgers, the New York Yankees, and the New York Giants. And he went to spring training, but something happened. He basically flunked out. Something happened. We still to this day don't quite know what happened. But he left and went back to New York and was very bitter, or was very bitter towards baseball. But I was the first son, the eldest son, and his dream for me was to become a baseball player. So when I was a child, he bought me a glove, bought me a ball. We would play catch in the backyard, all that sort of stuff. So that's what I was supposed to be.
In your family, was there anybody else gifted in theater arts that you can genetically inherit that dreams or so?
Interestingly enough, I had a great uncle who I never met. All right. I had a great uncle who I never met. He was my maternal grandmother's brother, who it turns out was involved in producing Broadway shows. But I didn't know this. I mean, he died when I was like 10 years old. Okay. I never met him. And it turns out, to be honest with you, he was homosexual. And so in my family, that was like, oh my God, I mean, that was a shame and embarrassment. But after he died, I had to go through his papers, and all I found were scripts. All I found was correspondence that he had communicated with producers and all this. And it was like, well, you know what? There is a theatrical gene somewhere here. All right.
Wow.
Now that did not go over with my father, because he knew that my uncle was gay. All right. And his concern was that, my God, if I'm going into the theater, my son is gay. And I was like, Dad, you have nothing to worry about. I love women. Okay. I love women. In fact, part of the reason I got involved in theater was because in the late 1960s, those were some of the loosest women, okay? I mean, they were, it was hippiedom. So, so there was some theatrical involvement there.
So in Florida, you wasn't happy at a teenager in Florida, so he's trying to gain away. And how's a day look like to you back then? Still remember?
Well, we all had our bicycle. I would ride my bicycle to the high school. And it's funny when we're talking about this, because 2 days ago, my high school teacher, who had the biggest impact on me and my life, died. She was 86 years old.
Sorry.
She was my high school drama teacher who saw talent in me, all right, she always cast me in the lead roles. She taught me how to be a good actor. She was terrific. And it's funny because she ran a professional program in high school. And throughout my years, even at Carnegie Mellon, sometimes I would see things and I would say to them, you would not qualify for my high school drama program, all right, because we had very strict discipline. We would never do these things, etc. So I've been thinking a lot about her and the impact she had on my life. So it is kind of, again, there's no such things as coincidences. So it's kind of interesting we're having this conversation when, I sent a note to her wife, to say what an impact this woman had on me and what she taught me and how I've tried to live up to her standards my entire life. And I'd like to think I succeeded,
You are. And then it's, if we have a lot more of her and you in that profession, look at teaching is really a noble profession, right?
It is. And that's why when I see teachers who have kind of like given up, or who are just, coasting, doing the same thing over and over again, I can't do it. And it's funny because even though my classes are online, I redo the subject matter every semester because things have changed. Things change very quickly. They move at a rapid pace.
Yeah.
And so, I've had other people at schools going, well, we'll just reuse the same content because it's an online course. And I'm like, no, we can't do that because this might be the first and only class they have with me. And I want them to realize that Don cares about them, and I'm going to give them the best. It's funny because my father's favorite baseball player was an Italian-American named Joe DiMaggio, all right? And Joe DiMaggio was famous for always giving 110%. And even at the end of his career, when his knees hurt and all that, people would say, why are you diving for the ball? Why are you? And he says, because there's a kid out there who is seeing me for the first time, and I want that kid to know who I am and what I believe in, and that's how I view teaching.
But and then that is exactly what I note in here. You view your life also that you're trying to do the best and get better and get better and get harder, put more onto the horizon there. So the question I want to give for you is, where did you find the strength to and the curiosity just to know more and to go into the one and out there and try to get the best out of everything that you can touch?
Well, I probably have to credit a professor from the University of Tampa, a different one, and he, I think he was a history professor or something, and I love all subjects. I love history and all that. And he had just announced in class that he had finally gotten his PhD, all right? All right. And I ran into him in the hall, and he looked dejected. He looked sad. And I said to him, Professor, I'm a little puzzled here. You just finished your dissertation. You got accepted. You're now a doctor. Why do you look this way? And he goes, Don, it's because now that I have my degree and I'm not considered a doctor and all that, people will actually think I know something. When the fact of the matter is, I feel like I hardly know anything. And that, if anything, I'm just now learning. I'm just now developing into a real student. And I thought, you know what? It's true. The learning never stops. And frankly, the learning never stops. And I also have made it a mission to be attuned to what young people are doing. All right? I mean, if you're like, what are young people doing? What's it? In the same way that, I sensed that the young people were into video games in the 90s. All right? And it's like, am I going to dismiss that? Am I going to criticize that? Or am I going to learn what is it about that is so appealing to them? And that's what I decided to do. Yeah.
Wow. On that audition night, when you ask the pupil about the three options, right? Having the last one is having a beer, having something, and enjoy, the show, right. And then you realize that something changed, and then you took action on it, right?
Correct.
And because you take an action, but nobody responded to it, so you quit, and then you move into the campsite. So you're very, very determined at what you do. All right. So teach us how can we be a little bit more determination to respond to life instead of letting life carry us in whatever that direction.
Well, I'd say that the one thing that I knew was that in the video games and all that, it was all being driven by computer science. All right. And so if we had the best school of computer science on campus and nobody in theater had ever approached them, I realized that, well, they're right there. Do it. All right. I mean, go over there and ask them to teach me. And I'll tell you a funny story about Randy. When we were first together, Randy invited me to go with him to Orlando, Florida, to a conference that was sponsored by an organization, a government organization called DARPA, which is the Defense Advanced Research Projects Administration. And these are the people who make Star Wars and all that. These were, these are the geniuses, right? And so for 3 days, I'm sitting in the audience, and I don't really know what's going on, okay? I mean, it's like high-tech gibberish. And in fact, I'm like thinking, do I belong here? And at the last day, there was a general or an admiral in charge. And he suddenly stops everything and he says, ladies and gentlemen, we've had a very special guest here for the entire weekend. He's a drama professor. And I started to look around thinking, oh, thank God, I'm not the only one here. And instead I hear, would Dr. Marinelli please come down front? So I get up and I walk down to the podium, and the admiral says, as far as we know, you are the only theater professor who is part of a school of computer science, and we want to know what impact this has had on you. And without even thinking, I said, well, I feel right at home. And the audience started to laugh because they figured he's feeling right at home, then he's clearly gone crazy, this guy. And then the light bulb went off. And I said, you know what? I know more about what you do than you know about what I do. For example, in computer science, everything is built upon algorithms, right? Algorithms. And algorithms are if-then equations, right? If this, then this will happen. I said, and that's where you use math, okay? You use math to do that. Now, in theater, we're doing something very similar. We're dealing with if-then equations. And I said, I'll give you an example. If I'm directing a play, I might say to the actor, I want you to come up from up left stage. Up left stage is a weak stage position. But I want you to cross saying those lines slowly until you get to center stage. Then I want you to stop. Then I want you to look out over the audience to a spot above them in the back wall. Then I want you to cross, in other words, move very quickly down right to the down right position on stage and say those lines. Because if you do that, then the audience will think the butler is the murderer. I said it's an if-then equation. The difference is it's not an algorithm, because what we're dealing with in theater is human psychology. And human psychology is can be a little crazy. Instead, it's what we call a heuristic. In other words, it's very likely that that's what they will believe. I said, so essentially, you geeks and we dramats are kind of doing the same thing for the same purpose, but using different language to achieve it. And everybody was like, now I get it. Now I get why you feel right at home.
Wow. I want to bring you to the moment that you realize that Randy was sick. Okay, so he probably, with you, he said that you are best friend of him. So when your best friend got sick, it's impacting on you also. So, right? So how did you feel back then when you heard the news?
Well, I can tell you that I think he felt very hurt that I didn't do the last lecture with him. But you have to realize the last lecture is a long-standing tradition at Carnegie Mellon. I did a last lecture like 20 years before him, okay? Last lectures were done all over. And I had booked an Asian tour to recruit students. So I was going to Taiwan, I was going to China, I was going to Japan, I think I was going to Australia. And when you book that, it was like, and I was like, Randy, it's just the last lecture. I mean, unfortunately, it's after you got a death sentence. And I have to tell you, his doctor was my doctor, right? I turned him on to my doctor. And then the other thing was, I had cancer in 2000. Okay. I had a very rare cancer. And at that time, Randy was like, well, look what you people eat. You Italians eat like anything. Because Randy ate the same thing every day for lunch. White bread, a little mayonnaise, and a slice of bologna or something like that. So when he called me up and he said, guess what? I've got pancreatic cancer. My normal reaction is to default to humor, all right, to humor. And I said, that really pisses me off. I said, I had cancer. Now you have to have cancer. And you have to have a worse cancer than my cancer. And he chimed in and he goes, yeah, but you had a rarer cancer than my cancer. And I went, you're right. I said, so we both win, right? And it was what we call gallows humor. Gallows humor is where they hang people. So it was like death humor. But nobody had any idea that the last lecture was going to explode the way it did. All right, nobody had any idea. And it was because Jeff Zaslow, who was a Carnegie Mellon alum, was in the audience, because it was a very touching time, right? It was very touching. And he wrote for the Wall Street Journal. Okay? And so after the last lecture, he wrote a column in the Wall Street Journal about this. You couldn't make this up. A professor who's told he's got a death sentence in pancreatic cancer being asked to deliver the last lecture like the day afterwards. And then that got picked up and it went viral. All right. And it just took off. It took off. And all of us were like, huh? Like, what's happening? Because the letters started to come in. I would get inundated with letters from people with cures. It's like, here's the cure for pancreatic cancer. Tell them to take this. Or here's the prayer for pancreatic cancer. And meanwhile, Randy was like, leave me alone. Okay? All right, leave me alone. He's like, every crazy person who's got the cure for pancreatic cancer is going to come out of the woodwork. And I'm like getting these letters going, well, what do you want me to do with them? I don't want to like burn them or anything. But he was like, don't send them to me anymore because it's too much. But he was a gallant man. He was very, very gallant. Now, one of the strange things was years later, you know what the TED Talks are?
Yes.
TED Talks, you know what TED Talks are? TED Talk franchise. And then there was TED Talk Fill in the City. And so there was TED Talk Detroit. And I was invited to come there, but I was invited to come to talk about a topic that I'm very wise about, which is Italian futurism. But Jeff Zaslow was on the same agenda to talk about the last lecture. And so I'm sitting in the audience in the front row, and Jeff Zaslow gets up and he's like, well, ladies and gentlemen, I'm here to talk to you about Randy Pausch, the last lecture. But I have to be honest with you, sitting in the front row is his partner. I mean, that's Don Marinelli, who was the tornado that Randy talks about in the last lecture. So, Don, kind of like, forgive me, but I'm going to talk about what you lived through. And I was like, hey, go right ahead, Now, here's where it gets weird. Shortly thereafter, Jeff was driving. He drove up to northern Michigan because he was what's called a ghost writer. All right. In other words, he would write the books for people, and usually he was anonymous. But for the last lecture, he got credit. Then there was a plane accident in New York City where a U.S. airplane landed in the Hudson River. It became very, very famous.
Yes.
And the captain was named Sully.
Sully.
All right. It became a movie and all that. Jeff Zaslow wrote the book for Sully. Okay. And Jeff had then was writing a book on bridal stores stores that cater to brides' weddings and all that. And he was driving back from northern Michigan in a snow squall. His car skidded out of control. He hit a semi-trailer and was killed instantly.
Oh.
So it was like, my God, Randy, last lecture, is no longer with us. Jeff Zaslow, who wrote the book, is not with us. And do you have my book about the last lecture?
Yes.
Yeah, the Comet and the Tornado?
Yes.
Okay. So then I was approached to write it, to write because Jeff, when he was writing the book, he would always call me and he'd go, Don, did you and Randy ever talk about this? And I would go, well, I tried. Or he goes, well, it's not in the book. And I go, well, it's a good story. I'll put it in my book. So, my book became the book of the month for Barnes and Noble in April of 2010.
Yeah.
So that's my story.
Wow. It's a beautiful story. So far, I know that we asked for an hour, but the story is so beautiful. Is that okay? We'll extend a little bit more to talk?
Sure, a little bit more.
Yes. I want to bring you to the moment that you lead in ETC and bring it globally. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
So you brought it to Australia, you brought it to Barcelona, you brought it to Portugal, you brought it to Osaka, Japan, you brought it to Silicon Valley, brought it to Korea, and make it global present. So how do you feel to put something that you and Randy put together and now making it global?
Well, it meant a lot to me because I'm pretty much a global citizen. I'm a loyal American. Don't get me wrong. All right. I'm a loyal American, but America is a pretty insular country. We've been told so long we're like the best, the greatest, the blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, but that's so narrow-minded because you don't see the beauty of the world. You don't see the wonder of the world. Australia it's an incredible country. It's a continent, for God's sakes. 3/4 of the country is desert. Japan was the enemy. Okay. It was the enemy. And one of the things that struck me was I had some rich people that sponsored the ETC, one of whom was a World War II veteran, fought on Iwo Jima, okay? And he had no animosity towards the Japanese, all right? And he came with me to meet the mayor of Osaka and sit on a panel to discuss new technologies and all that, because his belief was, you know what, they were doing what they were told by their government, and I was doing what I was told by my government. It was hell, it was wrong, but let's make up for it.
Yeah.
Now Japan's an ally, right? Look what Japan did to Vietnam, all right? It's like, China was an ally, and now it's like, what the hell? We got China problems now? What's going on here? And some of the best food I've ever had is in Barcelona, Spain. Okay, the best octopus I've ever eaten is in Portugal. All right, and in England, the project that the kids worked on was with Sir Peter Maxwell Davies, who was master of the Queen's music. All right, and it's like, oh my God, this is like a Harry Potter novel, the master of the Queen's music, I met Prince Philip. Okay, I was invited back over to Manchester for the royal opening of the school and of BBC, and it's like I'm sitting there chatting with Prince Philip, and all I'm thinking is an Italian kid from Brooklyn, New York, all right, who failed as a baseball player, and whose family was, run out of New York because of mafia stuff. And here I am chatting with the Queen's husband. What a world, what a strange world this is, and how thankful I am for all that's occurred. So I'm a big globalist, right? Which is why Van Lang University is creating a center just like the center I am creating in Pittsburgh.
Mm.
And the goal ultimately is for Van Lang students to come over to Pittsburgh, for Pittsburgh students to go over to Van Lang, and until that happens, that we're going to share online the games, the work that the students are doing, both places, so that we can share and learn from each other.
Beautiful, beautiful. So, a few last questions. By 2012, after broad ETC Global, it's not easy to let go of your baby child, right? So you must be sitting there somewhere, and before you make that resignation to yourself to that role again. So how did you feel to step down and move into the next?
I was tired. I was burned out. I was noticing physically that I can't sleep on an airplane. It's very difficult for me to sleep on an airplane, and so I would have to take drugs to go to sleep. I mean, legal drugs and all that, but it would ruin me. And I thought it was time for somebody younger to take over. What did hurt was how within 2 years they got rid of global. They shut it down except for Silicon Valley, because to keep it going meant you had to do what I was doing, and that was travel the world. You had to sacrifice, but it was worth sacrificing for the students. Apparently, the leadership after me did not think it was worth sacrificing for the students, and so it became very insular. And then ultimately, they got rid of Silicon Valley, so now there's only ETC Pittsburgh. So, but the one thing I will say is, I'm a futurist. I always look ahead. Okay, I always look ahead. For example, Carnegie Mellon drama was my life for 16 years, but I left there, and I wish them the best. Go forth. Things are going to change. They're going to evolve. I even tell my wife, when I die, I'm not going to haunt you. Okay, I'm not going to be a ghost. I'm going to the light. I want to go to the next world and say, okay, how did I do that role of Don Marinelli? Was I a good actor? Do I get an award, or do I have to come back? Please, I don't want to go back. I just want to be on the heavenly baseball team finally. Okay.
How old is your daughter now?
I'm sorry?
How old is you said earlier, you left
my
because
daughter. My daughter's 37. She's 37 years old.
All right.
And I have a 6-year-old granddaughter and a 3-year-old grandson. But they live in Chicago.
They live in Chicago.
And I live in Pittsburgh. And even there, they are developing their own life. Okay? They don't phone that much. They don't do FaceTime that much because they're busy. And the one good thing is my granddaughter is in first grade at the Lycée Français de Chicago. So she's in a French immersion school. So at least my daughter, who is also a globalist, my daughter is like, this kid's going to learn a foreign language. And in fact, when they go on vacation, they go to Denmark, they go to Ireland, and I'm like, you're traipsing to Europe with a 6-year-old and a 3-year-old, and it's like, yeah, because I want them to, because look at the impact it had on me. Because my daughter went with me to all these places.
Beautiful.
All right, she went to Australia, she went to Japan, she went to England with me. So she traveled with me all the time.
So how have you been? How do you feel over the past 12 years, since 2012 until now? How the journey to you?
It's been rewarding because of the number of people that have reached out to me and said, Don, you have knowledge and wisdom and experience, and we want some of that. Okay, and so it's been very rewarding in that regard that that people value me and that I have value to the students and all that. So. I mean, I also tell them that, if my daughter ever moved back to Pittsburgh with the kids, I probably would step down from a lot of what I'm doing so I could be a full-time grandpa. But then again, looking at these kids, that ain't going to happen. That's not going to happen. So I'll keep working. And the other good thing is I continue to travel. Like on Saturday, my wife and I are going to fly to New Orleans and take a Mississippi River cruise. And earlier this year, we took a cruise through the Great Lakes from Milwaukee to Toronto, Canada. And we just booked a train from Toronto to Vancouver, Canada in February. And we just booked a cruise from New York up the Hudson River. So I get out and do things. And then we're finally taking the grandchildren to Disney World in March. Okay, so we're going to do that. So I've got a good life. I got a good life.
So your granddaughter, what's her name, and grandson, what's his name?
My granddaughter's name is Sloane. 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 It means warrior in Old Irish.
Okay, Sloane. Okay.
Sloane, yeah.
Yeah.
And my grandson's name is Ansel. Ansel.
Ansel and Sloane.
Ansel, I have no idea why, but that's what they named him, so that's his name.
All right. Okay. So Ansel is 3, and then Sloane is 6, right?
6, yeah.
Okay. So I want to bring you to when you were similar age to them. Let's say put in the middle. Let's say 4.5. Okay. So now you have Ansel at 3, you have you at 4.5, and then you have Sloane at 6. And you tell the 3 of them about your career, your journey over the past 72 years. In short, what would you tell them?
I just found a photograph of me when I was 3 years old visiting the grandparents in Florida, which would ultimately become my home. And I would say to them, you know what? You have no idea what's in store for you. Okay? I mean, here's 3-year-old Don visiting Hialeah, Florida to see the grandparents, not knowing that, 7 years later, we would move in and I would be thrust into a whole new environment, a whole new culture and all that. And when I was 6, it was, when it was 6, it was probably me reading mafia stories to the other classes at the PS 272 in Brooklyn. So guess what? I would find myself reading stories and writing stories and creating stories and enabling stories for the rest of my life.
Beautiful, beautiful. The last question. Don, my wife and I, we've been on the quest to help people to improve their ability to think. And we believe that there's so many things that impact on our thinking capability today, so that make us diminishing our ability to think. So if every chance we got to talk to experts or great people, we ask this question. I would love to hear from you. So how have you been growing your ability to think over the years?
When Randy and I were starting the Entertainment Technology Center, before we had students, we would fly out to California and meet with the heads of all these companies that we knew that our students would want to work for. And so we went out and we met with Pixar. Now this is Pixar right after they made Toy Story. Okay, so they were still the little company that could in San Rafael, California, in Marin County. And Randy and I were like taking bets because we were going to ask them, being John Lasseter, the Chief Creative Officer of Pixar, and Ed Catmull, the Chief Technology Officer, if there is only one class that they would want every Pixar employee to have taken, what would that be? And so in the hotel, Randy and I are like, oh, they're going to want C++ programming. No, they're going to want C# programming. No, they're going to want this. We go meet in the meeting, we ask that question, and Ed Catmull, the Chief Technology Officer, says, improvisational acting. And I'm like, huh? Because I had suggested improvisational acting back in Pittsburgh before the trip, because I viewed it as the only living example of non-linear storytelling, which is what it is, because you don't know what's going to happen, but you've got to be on your toes for when the ideas come, when the actor says something. And I said to Ed Catmull, wow, why do you say that? And he says, because it's the best team building exercise. It's team building because in improvisational acting, it only works if your response to everything is yes and. Yes and. So I might start off saying, okay, it's a domestic story, and we're all in the kitchen, and I'm going to be mother, and you're going to be the father. And then all of a sudden the father says, well, I've got something to be honest with you. I'm actually an alien from outer space. You don't sit there going, well, that's stupid. That's stupid. Instead, you've got to go, okay, didn't see that coming. All right, let me build upon that.
Uh-huh.
And so I've always made it a point to willfully engage in something I don't know, but which is popular among a particular demographic, like young people. Esports was that, okay? Esports. I didn't know what the hell esports was until, like in Korea, they have what are called PC bang, and bang is Korean word meaning room, so PC room, and you go in there and they're playing video games. It's like, okay, all right. But it was from there that they started to do esports. And it was like, wow, what is this thing? Called esports. And I started to hang out with them, knowing that I don't play those games. My fingers ain't going to do what you can do. But clearly you're fascinated by this. Clearly you're immersed in this. So why? What's the appeal? And that's how I learn. I listen to them. I ask questions. And the funny thing is, I'm now considered an expert on the esports industry. I don't play the games, but I can tell you where the money is. I can tell you what are the up-and-coming games. I can tell you what the teams are. I can tell you the best tournaments and all that. So, and all of that is by approaching people that know more than I do, saying, teach me or let me learn from you.
Oh my God, beautiful. Donald, thanks a lot for spending your evening joining and sharing your amazing stories. And I really look forward to the spring to come so that we can sit together, have a cup of coffee, have some food, and enjoy the conversation in person. That would be wonderful.
I consider it's going to happen, okay?
It will happen. I look forward to it too.
All right, my friend. Thank you so much for reaching out to me.
Thank you very much for spending time with us. Have a wonderful evening. Okay?
Okay, you too. Bye now.